We have a very active, unsettled weather pattern that's going to be really starting to build and taking shape, especially heading into the weekend. But going into the next week, it looks extremely active. So let's start off with the overall water transport index and show you kind of the big picture and the overview of what we're talking about this morning. You can actually see this low pressure center that's really building across the West Coast. That's bringing some unsettled conditions and some rain showers further them, and as well as some cooler air. And then we also have another area of low pressure that's been hanging out up in the upper Midwest and along portions of the Northeast, but that will be diving down into portions off the Carolinas and into the Southeast. At the same time, we've got the beginning stages of southwest flow, and with that southwest flow is a warm flow, and it's got a lot of moisture with it, guys. And this is May, so the dew points are going to be rising, the temperatures are going to be rising, and then the heat fuels the thunderstorms. And that's exactly what's going to be playing out over the course of the next week or two, technically, because it starts to get really active. So let's take a look at the radar this morning. So here's an overview this morning on the radar depiction. You got that low pressure center hanging off the coast. You got some rain showers moving back into portions of Portland, into Sacramento this morning, back into the Los Angeles region. They're getting some rain, much needed rain for that region. But there's also another piece of energy that's moving across the Oklahoma City area this morning. And underneath that low pressure center up here into the upper Great Lakes in the Northeast, you've got some sporadic rain showers this morning. But all the energy is fueled in the middle of the country. On the outskirts of that, where that low pressure is, that's where the cooler air is going to be subsiding along the West Coast, and as well as that low pressure that's been hanging out and giving all the snow in portions of the Great Lakes. That is diving down now into portions of the Southeast, will bring some cooler than average temperatures for this time of year. But today, the main focal point is in the middle of the country, and that's where that southwest wind will be activating a dry line into the heat of the afternoon. These are afternoon heated thunderstorms, so we do have a slight risk for severe storms draped across a good part of Oklahoma City. That does include portions of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, especially west back into San Angelo, and including the San Antonio area. So this looks like to be a big swath, but we're going to have an active dry line that's going to be really setting up. And the biggest hail looks to be folding just southwest of the DFW Metroplex. This is down towards maybe the Stephenville point southward, back into the San Angelo area, would include all the way down into portions of central Texas. But there's also another pocket of energy further north, just probably northwest of the Oklahoma City area. They could see some large hail too, and the most probability of seeing an isolated tornadic spin up. So this is a daytime heating event. It looks to unfold around 3 o'clock and form along the dry line, and these will be shifting westbound across good part of central Texas and North Texas. They will be at the strongest on the initiation point. So the further west you live, say west of the I-35 corridor, you're going to be seeing some of the potential, the larger hail associated with these. But once you move past east of the I-35 corridor, these are going to be weakening and lesser probability of seeing a stronger storm, as these are going to be in more or less the weakening phase, and then almost collapse as we get into past sunset time frame. But we're gonna have to be watching for supercell thunderstorms. Those could be some large hail producers. Again, it's not really a tornadic setup down further south. We could see an isolated tornado or two up there into the northwest of the Oklahoma City area into the heat of the afternoon. So, but heading in tomorrow, man, it gets really hot. So the only cooler air in town is really underneath those low pressures like I showed you. But in the middle of the country, man, it's got a downsloping wind across that's coming off the Rockies here, and a west wind is your most intense, highest wind that heats up very quickly. And those temperatures are going to soar down there in Texas. Wichita Falls cranking at 97 degrees. Some of these areas, the heat index could approach the 100-degree mark, as the dew point starts to surge too, into the almost in the 70 range for the first time this season. So that gives you an idea of the moisture content that's going to be available to fuel these storms, because we haven't seen 70-degree dew points all year long, and this is the beginning stages. This is typically actually what you kind of see in the month of May as things really start to turn over and the atmosphere really starts to turn over. So down further south, this is your Friday risk. So yes, you're going to have a very downsloping wind coming off the Rockies into West Texas. Heats up very quickly. We're talking near record high temperatures in a lot of these regions. But further south, you have the most unsettled weather. And yes, we could be looking at yet again another slight risk for severe storms. Further south into central Texas again, these could be some large hail producers. You'll likely have a strong cap over the Metroplex, but further south, you have to be concerned. Again, these are heated fuel thunderstorms. Further north, that warm front's going to be lifting all the way up into Nebraska, so you have to be concerned about even those storms, as well as the pattern really starts to turn unsettled. So as we go into your Saturday time frame, so here's the overall setup. Again, you got the dry line down here into Texas. You've got the warm front lifting a little bit further north. So the further north this warm front surges, that puts the unsettled conditions more in your area. So that puts the soupy air mass of the extremely unsettled weather setups. And then as these spokes of energies, these impulses of energy comes in off the southwest flow, that activates daytime fueled thunderstorms, typically after about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, gets activated. And those could be some stronger storms. But further north, you've got that boundary. You have a little bit more unsettled weather across the Pacific Northwest and draped across our northern regions, across portions of Montana, as well as into portions of the Dakotas, while much of the Northeast experiences pretty clear skies, and that'll head into this weekend. So, but yes, all the instabilities really draped across the middle of the country, because here's the setup by Saturday. Look at those dew points well into the 70s for a good part of central, north, and east Texas, basically Oklahoma City eastward, going into Kansas. Look how far north it surges with that warm front. So the further north, the further that warm front's able to get, that puts that area into play. So I think it's really reaches portions of Iowa, even into portions of, say, Illinois by the time we head into your Saturday afternoon. Again, that puts these areas of concern in play, and these escape values are really extreme, guys. There's a lot of fuel that's going to be fueling these thunderstorms. So if this atmosphere is going to be turning over and able to break the Kappan inversion, again, these could be some big time hail producers. That'll take the place on the day on Saturday. Again, right along that dry line where it gets active. These aren't widespread in any day or time. This is just, 40 to 50% coverage fueled by the heat of the afternoon thunderstorms. Going into that 8 o'clock window is probably the most intense time. And then once the sun goes down, these will be fueled and start weakening down here into the southern plains. But here's the setup for Saturday. These areas will likely be increased. Right now they have a marginal risk in play. Cross again right along the dry line down here in West Texas. This would probably be expanded and included North Texas. This will be the day on Saturday, but this kind of gives you an idea where the warm front's going to be surging further north. Yes, there's the Illinois region. So this whole area in this region is going to be within the warm sector, within that warm front. So it puts you in play of the probability of seeing some stronger storms that could be some big time hail producers and some damaging winds. And so yes, there's the setup for Sunday. Kind of the same deal, right? You got the southwest flow, you got the surging Gulf, well above average temperatures down here in the Gulf of Mexico. Dry line setup, again, it's the heat of the afternoon. You've got supercell thunderstorms potentially forming right along the dry line. Again, where the warm front surges, the further deeper you get in the weekend, it's going to be surging a little bit further north. So yeah, it could be even into portions of southern Wisconsin by then. So all the snow you were able to get just over the last couple of days, now by heading into the weekend, or especially early next week, you could be even talking about severe storms. So that's the dynamics of the atmosphere really starting to change of what's going to unfold as we get deeper into the weekend and especially into next week. So here's the setup for the next 5 days. You've got these underneath those areas of low pressure, you've got the more unsettled weather, the cooler air, and those will be some light rain showers and some cooler than average temperatures along the west coast. And again, right here along here into the portions of the Northeast, into the Carolinas, the middle of the country is completely the opposite. South wind surges, and it's the deeper you get into the weekend, going into early next week, the further north it's going to be able to go. And so this whole area is well above average temperatures, and heat fuels the thunderstorms. And as you get into peak heating of the day, those are the time frames that we got to be the most concerned about. So yes, going into Wednesday next week, there's the active setup. Again, we have the active dry line out here in West Texas, out in western Kansas, western Oklahoma. Look at the warm front, surges well north, all the way to Iowa, Illinois. Again, this heat could even be in further north by then. So that puts this whole entire axis in play of the more unsettled conditions and the greater probability of seeing some heavier rainfall and some severe storms, again, into the heat of the afternoon. But it gets really interesting as we go into Wednesday, especially into Thursday next week. We'll have two areas of instability to be concerned about. First, it appears that we'll have an area of low pressure that'll form actually right along the coastal regions down here into the Gulf of Mexico, draped across portions of Texas and Louisiana, fueling the well above average sea surface anomalies in the Gulf. So we'll have this area of low pressure. As well, at the same time, we'll have another dynamic low that'll be diving down here off the west coast, back into the Rockies, and this could really start to develop and deepen the trough as we get into the middle of the next week. So here's the surge on the water vapor imagery with the initial low pressure, say around the 10th time frame, could be the 11th time frame, but it looks to be a lot of energy coming out of the Gulf of Mexico with this area of low pressure spinning up, spinning up across portions of the deep south. And there's an idea of how far the warm front could lift by the time we get into that Thursday time frame. So that it could even surge all the way up into maybe portions of Minnesota and as well as of Wisconsin. So yes, again, that puts the whole area of access by the middle of next week, heading into next weekend, extremely unsettled across the central and southern plains, as well as into the portions of the southeast, and even into the northern plains could be on the verge of seeing some of those severe storms. So there's the setup by the 11th time frame as that significant trough really dives into the middle of the country. And this has got, again, a lot of lift mechanism with it, and the dew points again are going to be rapidly surging well north this time. It could even reach up to Canada. An extremely soupy, unsettled, warm, a lot of water content is going to be pulling in from the Gulf, and that puts all this area into play. Right now, the Climate Prediction Center has much of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, going all the way further north into Illinois, Iowa. This whole air mass, this area back here into Arkansas, portions of the southeast could be inundated with very heavy rainfall, especially as we head into middle of next week, going into next weekend. Look at the dew points by the time you get into Thursday timeframe, guys. You've got the 70s in Texas, 70s in Oklahoma, 60s in Kansas, 60s in Nebraska, going into 60s in South Dakota, and yeah, that's almost 60 into the Canadian border. So that kind of gives you an idea of this dynamic system that's going to be really coming across, and the warm front lifting further and further north, and that stream could literally take it from the Gulf all the way to Canada by then, and putting that whole area in really extremely unsettled weather conditions, with the water vapor transport index just going almost off the charts with the extreme amount of water vapor, especially as we headed to maybe next weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday time frame, with this powerful low pressure center setting up over the Rockies, and this just steady stream of moisture just pulling in from that southwest flow. You got the El Nino induced southwest flow. Watch my El Nino video yesterday. You kind of give you an idea, show the dynamics of what we're talking about. as we're transitioning out of that La Nina and getting a more active subtropical jet stream. And it's going to be really evident as we get into the middle of next week. So right now, here's the setup on the global models, as they do differ exactly where this placement takes place. So here's the Euro guidance putting the most extreme heavy rainfall over eastern Texas, Louisiana, portions of Oklahoma, and to Arkansas, as well as into Missouri. Again, we'll have those unsettled weather conditions across the Pacific Northwest. We'll have that northern branch bring in a little bit more unsettled, and that'll dive further south into portions of the Northeast, but not as unsettled for them. But again, all the actions really into the middle of the country that could lift well north all the way up into Iowa and including Illinois. The GFS guidance for the next 10 days, this is the next 10 days rainfall, has the access a little bit further off to the west. So depending on the axis, obviously this far out, the global model's different in the timing of this system, but both have extremely heavy rainfall somewhere right along into the southern plains, the central plains, and again, where that north, that warm front's able to surge far north, we could be even more or less into the Dakotas, into Minnesota, draped across Iowa, into the Illinois, down here in the southeast. This whole area could be under the gun with extremely heavy rainfall and setting up with severe weather as well. So it even looks more active, as we head into next week. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. I know there's a lot to cover today, so we'll fine tune this as we get closer, as the weather pattern starts to turn extremely unsettled, but I'll keep you posted on a daily basis. So catch me in the next update where I protect you before and after storm.